The episode opens in Washington, D.C., with preparations underway for an education reform bill signing ceremony attended by politicians and the media. Vice President Frank Underwood attends the ceremony alongside President Jarrett Walker. President Walker signs the bill into law and specifically thanks Frank Underwood, creating a moment of public recognition. Later, Jim Matthews expresses concern to Frank Underwood about the current Pennsylvania gubernatorial candidate's inexperience, unaware that Frank Underwood has a different plan. Frank Underwood dismisses Matthews' concerns and implies he won't support the candidate. Afterwards, Frank Underwood meets with reporter Zoe Barnes, initiating a risky, secretive relationship and offering her a scoop. Meanwhile, Doug Stamper is tasked with getting Congressman Peter Russo into the Pennsylvania governor's race, receiving instructions from a mysterious contact at a diner. Doug deals with other issues, including receiving a request for more money from Rachel Posner. At a campaign meeting, Frank Underwood arrives to push for Peter Russo, promising that Russo can secure a deal to save jobs in the district. Claire Underwood expresses reservations about Frank Underwood's use of Russo. President Walker informs the vice president that he is being sidelined from the Pennsylvania campaign, diminishing his role and angering him. Finally, Frank Underwood meets with Zoe Barnes at her apartment, questioning her about her sources and Peter Russo, furthering their complex relationship. Rachel Posner attempts to blackmail Doug Stamper, threatening to go to the police or the media with information about him, Peter Russo, and Frank Underwood. Doug, concerned, gives her money and asks her to contact him with a new address so he can help her. Meanwhile, during vetting, Doug discusses congressmen and potential scandals with Chief of Staff Linda Vasquez and Jim Matthews, making them uncomfortable by asking about prostitutes. Elsewhere, Zoe Barnes meets with Janine Skorsky, who questions her motives for calling. Janine reveals that Underwood's press secretary role was offered to a new, inexperienced hire instead of Zoe due to Zoe's perceived inflexibility, leading both reporters to feel used by him. Janine also mentions that the Congressman Russo story was shifted from the Herald to Slackline. Doug attends an AA meeting and shares his struggle to feel remorse for the harm he causes. Linda warns Frank that Doug is in a mess, but assures him she has persuaded Doug to follow instructions, concluding with a cynical observation about trust and intimacy. Frank Underwood arrives and suggests that Rachel's presence would help Peter Russo trust him, and instructs Linda that her presence will be beneficial to him. Feeling the pressure, Jim is offered a sum of money by Doug, which seemingly stems from the Russo incident. Jim, overwhelmed, ends up in the Oval Office, where he briefly sits in the president's chair before Frank pulls him back to reality. Doug has reservations about continuing to work with Peter Russo, but Zoe persuades him to stay on board, securing his commitment with the stipulation that his children remain uninvolved and that there be no press or photos. Meanwhile, Peter Russo meets with Lisa, a woman with a black eye, at a motel, questioning her about her past and her trustworthiness, implying a controlling dynamic. Stamper shares with Underwood his findings on Peter Russo, including details about his past with prostitution. Underwood and Linda Vasquez discuss these potential scandals, as well as the endorsement of Peter Russo. Stamper asks Vasquez to provide Rachel Posner with a place to stay, and Frank supports it to keep her contained while they are running Russo's campaign. Vasquez, Underwood, and President Walker meet with Congressman, who is unsure of Peter Russo. Later, Peter Russo is interviewed about his past substance abuse, claiming he's now sober and dedicated to his children and faith. Zoe visits Rachel, but Lucas intercepts her, confessing his feelings for her and prompting a kiss, all under Underwood's watchful eye. At Peter Russo's home, Russo kisses Zoe. Nance settles Abby into her room at the Underwoods' house. Frank Underwood visits Zoe Barnes at her apartment. He helps her open a bottle of wine and they discuss their relationship. Zoe finds a spider and traps it under a glass for her landlord. Frank suggests she call her father since it's Father's Day. While Zoe speaks to her father on the phone, assuring him she is fine and won't be home for Thanksgiving or Christmas due to work, Frank observes her. As Frank is pleasing Zoe, he asks her if she is going to wish him a happy Father's Day, knowing he has no children.